Hi guys, I'm Brad Montgomery, and welcome to The Breakdown, and here we talk about science, psychology, and investing. Today we're going to be talking about the U.S. economy and where we are as far as the presidential election and how it could affect the economy. Before we get started, if you missed any of our episodes, you can always head over to kboxtv.com/community/the-breakdown. Now let's break it down. And I'm here with Carlos Aguilar, economics professor, and there's a lot of stuff that you can talk about when it comes to the economy. There's that old saying that kind of applies to many areas in life. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. But one thing I do want to kind of jump off on, because it just seems to always be in the news, is interest rates. It's actually kind of one or two things. It's inflation and interest rates, and they've kind of have something to do with each other, or at least we hope they do, in trying to tame one by adjusting the other. So interest rates are high right now, right? Now, I say high in kind of an air quotes way because, you know, there were times back in the 80s and you know, when they were
absolutely
quite a bit higher. So, and just for people to have a little bit of a comparative analysis, like what were some of the highest interest rates that we've ever seen as far as, I don't want to go too far back, but like in the 70s and 80s and 90s, just for some perspective.
Yeah. Luckily, and thank you for asking me to participate in this podcast. I'm old enough, young enough to remember interest rates back in the 1980s. I just graduated from graduate school, and I was living in California, Santa Barbara, with my then wife. We started looking at buying a home, and we had a heck of a deal of a nice home overlooking the cliff in Santa Barbara, looking towards the Pacific Ocean.
Beautiful up there.
And it's just stunning. Even though interest rates were high, how high were they? They were 17% mortgage rates.
Wow. Can't even imagine.
That kept me away from purchasing it, although I knew it was a good deal. The interest rate just made the mortgage payment phenomenal. I was working in Los Angeles at that time, so you're asking how high have they gone? They were about 17, 18%. They've been as high as 12% at other times. And recently we had a recession a few years ago and COVID where interest rates became negative for a little while. So they do fluctuate.
And this is what, and actually I'm glad you brought that up, because I think they brought them down so low to kind of help stimulate, right? And because we want to get ourselves out of what COVID had brought us into,
right.
Disrupting the economy. Where were interest rates, if you remember, and after the Great Recession, after like 06, 07, 08, where were they then?
Oh my God, they were after the recession. They just came down below 2%.
Okay.
Approaching zero. Okay. We had a significant slowdown. Usually interest rates are low when the economy is slow.
Got it.
Or they're low when inflation is low. So when inflation is low, interest rates are good to be low. If the economy is slowing down, then interest rates tend to come down, but that's not a good time to be looking at the economy. Yeah, interest rates are low, but that's because nobody's buying.
Right. And there was kind of a sweet spot coming out, I guess, before the pandemic. And this is just a little bar, but interest rates were pretty good as far as buying homes.
Yes.
Pre-pandemic, the dollar had gotten stronger.
Yes.
And I remember there was one economist, he kind of made a joke where he said it's almost like the dollar is too strong. There is such a thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the dollar swings. It's not as erratic as other currencies across the world. But before the pandemic, things were going rather smooth for several years. Yeah. And it looked like nothing was going to stop our progress in the economy. Interest rates are low. Unemployment was low. Inflation was pretty much contained. And all of a sudden, this unknown virus hits us, and everything, as everybody knows, came to a screeching halt.
Yeah, all that smooth progress that we had year after year after year, and yeah, like you said, it just rattled the boat pretty good. And
you know what we call those events in the study of economics? Sometimes events are predictable, but we call that type of event a random event.
Okay.
because when was the last time we saw a virus attack our economy, world economy as it did? So that was a random event, but boy, was it a strong one.
Sure was. And so let's also talk about where we are, because you mentioned interest rates, not necessarily the greatest judge, because when they're low, it's because they're trying to get the economy kick-started or keep, stock market is high, over 40,000.
Yes.
And I remember when I was young, that was kind of the barometer. That was the go-to barometer. Well, the health of the economy, well, the stock market's up. But we've seen these things where it diverges. And I remember as I started coming up into my 20s and 30s, I can't remember what event happened, but the economy was not very healthy. The stock market was very healthy, and economists were kind of like, investors were happy for whatever set of circumstances, but the general health of the economy was not in the best.
It might be the financial crisis that you're thinking about. Maybe not, but right after the financial crisis just hit its rock bottom, I remember it was right around Valentine's Day. The reason I remember is I went out to have dinner with a book representative on that day.
Oh, nice.
And I go, we look kind of strange being together on Valentine's Day. Right. But the point is, he knew economics really well. Right. And his wife was really into economics. And right around that time, I said, what do you think? Should we get back into the market? And he said, no, I don't think so. And I thought, God, I think we should. Because that was the rock bottom.
Buy low.
Almost the day after, the stock market started going up so significantly. We were still suffering from that financial crisis. And sometimes, most of the time, the stock market is what we call a lead indicator of the economy. Okay. So it diverges when things look bad, but the market starts, the stock market, the investors start looking ahead. And they said, hey, this is it. This is a bottom. And at that time, that was rock bottom. So, yeah, sometimes that happens right now.
So they're looking ahead.
Yeah.
And so you basically get their kind of future projection.
Yeah, typically they say 6 months, 9 months. There are times when the stock market parallels what the economy is doing. There are times when they just diverge. This year has been a strange year. I was going to say it's a political year.
It is, yeah.
And
some people are kind of holding back, don't they?
Yes.
Isn't that what?
Yes, but typically, and most people to this day don't know it. People who are in the investment market know it. People who are stock analysts know it. Economists kind of know it. But 80% of the time during an election year, guess what happens to the stock market? It goes up.
Oh, okay.
Counterintuitive, is it not?
Yeah.
You would think we would wait.
Yeah, just pull out.
But I never believed it when I first heard that. Yeah. And I'm old enough to have been looking at this market for many years.
Now you're a believer.
And I'm a believer. Honestly, at the beginning of this year, I did an analysis. I said, regardless of which party is in, because I know what the Republican Party was looking for, I know what the Democratic Party was doing, and I know that the economy was good or is good under the Democratic Party. Thus far, it's slowed down. I said, this is a no-brainer. And I told my kids, hey, you kids ought to get into the market. They never listened to their dad. Typical.
Maybe they'll start.
Yeah, I hope so. But did I listen to myself? No, I get too busy.
Right.
But I was able to see that, yeah, this is going to be a good year for the market. Either way, whether the Democrats lost the election or whether the Republicans wins the election, I saw the conditions that the market will continue to do well.
That's okay. Interesting. And so, and I believe because we crossed that 40,000 mark.
Yes.
And then we had that little bit of a dip, but that had to do more with Japan.
This dip that we had a few weeks ago, God, that was just a quick buying opportunity. It came down so quickly, and then it ricocheted up again.
Yeah. Because, and you know what's interesting? I thought that as a buying opportunity. I didn't act on it, but I thought that as a buying opportunity too, because it wasn't an issue with our economy.
No problem with the economy.
It was an issue in Japan. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, that can't keep us down forever, you know. It could rattle you, and it rattled. And
yes.
That's why it went. Yeah. But it was. I think a lot of people use it as a buying opportunity because almost, like you said, like 2 days later it was.
Yeah, just like that. It's kind of like you're hiking and you see a rattlesnake, but it's at a distance. And, oh, I'm okay. I can go this other way.
Yeah, so you're fine.
That's exactly what happened.
Now, is unemployment running low or high right now?
That's kind of the sad good news. Our economy last year, national economy unemployment rate was significantly low, almost historically low again. And unemployment rate started going up slowly. It's gone up again this last month. I think we're up to, what is it, 4.1, 4.3 for the July reading. Surprised everybody. Historically, it's still a low rate. The unemployment rate, for anybody who wants to know, in El Paso is typically higher than the national rate.
I'd heard that, okay.
But the good news is, and I studied unemployment rates historically for El Paso, we used to run, Brad, 2% higher than the nation. So if unemployment was 5% in El Paso, in the nation, it would be 7% in El Paso. The good news is that in the recent years, our unemployment rate now only runs 1% higher than the nation. So that's good news in El Paso.
Did you ever have any thoughts or theories on why that was?
Gosh, there's so many analysts.
Does that have to do with like the international trade or?
Yeah, basically, they used to blame Juarez, and I go, no, not true. They used to blame the fact that we were such a distant economy wasn't a strong economy. That's partially true. But the bottom line is that we have a very large young population in El Paso, have had it for a while. We tend to undereducate our students in El Paso nationally. There is not enough of an infrastructure, whether it's manufacturing, service, or the new technologies coming in. So unfortunately, the younger citizens of El Paso don't have many places to look at. They should look at education first. And then when they graduate, unfortunately, many years ago, they had to leave. Yeah. We have more industry than we used to. We have more technology than we used to. And the weather is good. Prices are good. People from outside the city, young people, are coming in here. And I've noticed some younger people getting educated in El Paso. They're saying, hey, I can stay here and do some good. So that makes me happy.
That is good, yeah. Get away from the brain drain.
Yes, exactly.
So now this is what's, I had heard this a couple of times at a couple of different places, and I kind of, if you could explain this a little bit. They talk about how one of the ways to get inflation down is by driving unemployment up.
Yes.
It's apparently which nobody wants to do, because you hate to, you do good, but you make the dollar stronger, but more people are without jobs.
Correct.
I mean, it's like, and everybody makes the argument, well, it's the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and it's been that way for many years. Basically, when you have inflation, it's like when you have a bad cold, or let's say you have a flu. You really have to buckle down. You can't eat what you used to. You have to sleep more than you used to. You've got to take medicine, which never tastes good. Right. So when I discuss inflation with my students, I do that analogy. Hey, the economy is getting out of hand. It's too hot. What do? You have to cool it down. How do you cool it down? You cut government spending. You raise interest rates. When you raise interest rates, people can't borrow. They can't spend. That drives the economy down. You have less government spending. That creates more unemployment. It's not that we create unemployment intentionally. It's a byproduct of slowing down the economy and the higher interest rates. There are some new economists that are looking at this, and they're saying, well, maybe we shouldn't slow down the economy that much. Well, we've had kind of a slow process here with the economy slowing down, and unemployment hasn't been that hurt that much with inflation. So this is one of the first times where we can technically say, hey, it's not over yet, but it sure looks like it. We've achieved a soft landing.
Right.
Doesn't happen often.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, and maybe a time factor, who knows, but the way it was kind of drug out, inflation did cool, but we didn't have mass joblessness. So it almost is like we kind of avoided.
We were able to manage it. Part of it was that we had a very strong economy. Part of it was that inflation wasn't as out of control as everybody thought it was. It did start to get away from us, but the Federal Reserve kept tight on it. The government curtailed some events, not a lot, but yeah, it lends credence to the fact that our economy is stronger than we thought, and we were able to maneuver that soft landing.
And I think too, and that's something that you don't really think about all the time. Pre-pandemic, we had such a strong economy, so we could take a hit. It's not always the case.
No.
So we were lucky in the positioning that we were to come from, up high to a medium area.
Yeah.
Instead of going.
You bring up a very good point. Yeah, you're exactly right.
So,
we were at a strong point. Like a boxer, we can take a couple of jabs on the chin.
There you go.
And I'll hold on and wait.
Now, so since inflation is more under control, right? Does it look like it could improve even more, or does it look like we're going to be on track to be where we were post-pandemic, or was that just some kind of economic oddity where, coming out of 06, 07, 08, we just had this nice smooth ride. It's usually a jagged line up. Everyone wants progress to be this nice smooth, but it's always a jagged line.
Yep.
But are we kind of headed back on that kind of smooth ride out of this, like we saw in 07, 06, 07, 08, or is this going to be are we just in a different area for a little while?
One thing I've learned about economics, it's never the same.
Yeah.
The theories, the business cycles, the economic cycles, they're there, but they're never the same. I kind of suspect that we'll come back to a nice growth economy with low unemployment and low inflation. We have achieved the last couple of months near target inflation, which is about 2%. Now, those are what we call snapshots. A lot of people look at it and say, oh, good news, we're there. But no, we have to have several more months of it. I think it's coming under control. Food prices have stabilized. Medical prices have kind of stabilized. Automobile prices, they've kind of stabilized because the demand is not there. The problem is that I and many people look at what our costs were in food, and we can't shake off the fact that inflation was there, and it's still there, but it's not growing. But we still, when we go shopping for food items, when we go out to eat at restaurant, that high price is still there. So it's
not getting worse.
It's not getting worse.
It's not really going back to what it was.
And what's not happening is our incomes aren't rising quick enough to say, hey, I can afford this meal now like I used to beforehand. So I do think our projection is on a good track, and I think it'll be on a good track regardless of who wins this election.
And it's interesting. You reminded me of, I'm trying to remember the year. This would have been maybe about 2010, 2011. And everyone seemed to get it under control. It was, I think, during the Great Recession, 06 through 08, people started using their credit cards.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
I mean, just crazy credit card debt. And I guess as the economy got strong, stayed strong, people paid it down.
Yes.
Because I remember there was actually some concern.
Yes.
Among officials that average American credit card. I mean, it's like prices had, I think, gone up for some stuff back then, and people were like, well, I'm not changing my lifestyle. I'm just going to credit card. And so, but I guess when things go well, they kind of go well in all areas.
Yeah.
So things got paid down, and debt kind of got paid down, and
the old adage is a rising sea lifts all boats.
Oh, yeah.
That's an old Kennedy phrase from way back Boston area.
You mentioned one, and this is so true, from Charlie Munger, when he had said, a man can never go into a river twice because the man's different, the river's different.
Yes.
And I thought that was so funny, and that's kind of what you were saying, very true, because when I ask, well, where are we going now? Well, we've never been here, so it's hard to know exactly where we're going.
Yeah.
So
every economic phase, it looks similar to what it was yesterday, but it's never the same. Charlie Munger was quite an investor, and he had a simple way of telling people, this is the way it is.
Yeah, he really did.
He was good at it.
Yeah. Check out some of his stuff on YouTube. You can learn some life lessons as well. So obviously we've been trying to bring inflation down. What were the drivers that pushed it up to begin with? I had thought, and this was my own, I had thought some of that stimulus money, the stimulus checks now some people have argued, look, we had to print our way out of this. We had to print money to avoid a worse, so, but they were saying that that's kind of what we did. We bought up, I guess, a lot of our own debt.
Yes.
In 07, 08, like General Motors, and they ended up getting it back. And
yes.
So it worked out well, but this time there was a little more of a negative.
Yeah, there was a negative impact in it.
But why was there more of a negative impact this time instead of 07 through 08? Because I guess one guy compared it to, 07, 08, 06, 07, 08, Great Recession, we had one spare tire. And we used it. And so then this time we didn't have any spare tires.
No, that's very true. And it's a random event. This virus, COVID virus that we had, really hit us significantly, and it was worldwide. So when we came out of COVID, everyone thought, hey, we're back on track. I had some friends telling me that automobile prices are going to be low, just like they were during the 2008 crisis. There's going to be a big supply of automobiles. And I said, well, let's see. People tend to be economists when they they see things, and they don't have the history. And I saw a couple of guys making mistakes that way, and I said, well, we'll see. So we get out of COVID, and all of a sudden prices start to spike up. Well, we had not realized how a worldwide virus, when everyone tends to get sick, or when the government imposes stringent regulations it created supply chain disruptions. And those supply chain disruptions created, to put it very simply, it created a supply shortage. People came out and they wanted to go buy things. So we didn't have enough cars, too many buyers. We didn't have enough food because the shipments weren't being made. We're over those supply chains now, disruptions. We've pretty much taken over them and gotten them back on track. Prices have been rising for the last 2 years. The question then comes up, and everybody likes to blame administrations. Well, you kind of have to, even though they don't create it. Basically, my premise is a lot of companies just weren't making the money that they lost during COVID, and they saw a need to raise prices. Consequently, they increase the prices. You see it in El Paso restaurants in food prices. It doesn't matter if you go to a low discount food store. Those prices are going up, and everyone seemed to be wanting to make money. Yes, they gave us pay raises, but the price increases were more than the pay raises. The government saw that, hey, this is getting a little bit out of hand. We need to control this inflation. So it's getting under control. And I still go back to the fact that, yes, it's under control, but doggone it, prices are still high. Like you said, they haven't come down. Right. So
they've stopped going up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
COVID is what caused the supply chain disruption, which caused a change in prices. People then start to react like there's inflation, and then they create more inflation. And then the supply chain went away, but companies are still wanting to earn those hefty profits.
It's so funny you say that, because one of the industries that got in trouble was the eggs.
Yes. Yes.
Because I remember the government finally said something, because they had fixed the problem, but they just kind of, prices stayed high.
Yeah.
And so then they looked into it, and the next thing you know, the prices went down.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes.
Which is, everybody wants money. And if you're having a legitimate problem, then you need to charge more. Yes, that's one thing. But once you fixed your problem, you got families out there that need to put food on the table. You can't just.
My old adage in being in economics and teaching economics for so long, and I tell this to my students, especially when I teach an introduction to business course and go into business, I tell them, guys and girls, right? I get caught for that. But, guys, there's enough money in America. This is an extremely wealthy country. We don't have to be greedy.
Right.
We can all make money, and we can make good money. And if we do that, our economy will be even stronger. So sometimes, greed gets in the way. But fortunately, it found it can be corrected. And eventually the consumer will say, hey, no, I'm not going back to that coffee store anymore. I'm not going back to that restaurant. So the consumer has to be also a controller of prices.
Very true. And you know, it's interesting you talk about that. I mean, it is an amazing country, and I think we forget that. You know, I mean, and it's almost been like kind of self-running, you know, since we've gotten it going. And you know, you think about 200 years ago, even here 150 years ago, we'd be sitting in the desert.
Yes.
With creosote around us.
Yes.
And there might be a few lights around downtown Juarez once the sun went down. But it's amazing what this country has done in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Now, there's some discussion that China's kind of been doing the same now as we've gone through the 70s, 80s, and up through today. But our country has just been, it's the amount of wealth.
Yeah, the amount of wealth.
It's
the amount of ingenuity is what we have here.
Yeah.
The wealth in terms of education that we have, the wealth that we have in terms of a democracy is very important. Sometimes we get concerned about countries taking over. I remember when I was younger, Germany was going to lead the world economy.
That's right.
And then it was Japan that was going to lead the world economy.
Yep.
And now it's China. I have told my students, if I was you in school, I'd learn the Chinese language. Why? Because we're going to be trading more with them.
Right.
Are they going to catch up? They're a big economy because it's a big population, but they're not yet as big as we are. And they're approaching our economy, but it's still going to take a while.
And we run differently.
Yes.
You know, we really, the U.S. is a pull for talent from the whole world. And I don't think China's really been able to tap into that
Exactly.
as much.
Yeah.
You know, I think I had seen this thing where Los Angeles is one of the, when it comes to like arts and education, and it's one of the biggest brains in the world.
Yes.
And
yes.
you've got, you know, and when you look at just economy sizes, you got Texas is a massive economy in its own right. California is a massive economy in its own right.
Yeah.
New York is a massive economy.
Right.
And this is not even the United States. This is just individual states.
States, yeah. The old adage is if California was a country, it would be the 8th largest country in the nation.
That's crazy.
In the world, I'm sorry.
And that's
Yeah,
amazing.
8th economy. That's how phenomenal it's been.
That's just insane.
Stunning.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard to
so
believe.
we still have a strong, I mean, as a country, we
Yeah.
definitely have a,
We have a strong base.
For sure.
And the Chinese, they want to parallel what we do. And of course, they have a different, what we call political, but they didn't get either.
And really quickly, before we wrap up, I do want to talk about, it was interesting because Korea was starting to come up, but seems like it kind of got usurped by China.
Yes.
Because
yes.
as soon as they started to flower,
Yeah.
China, all of a sudden, automotive industry and everything else just, you know.
Yeah. In reality, China decided to become market-based. As much as they were not market-based, they were a socialist economy. When they opened up a market-based economy under socialism.
Yeah, it's like a blend.
Yes.
Because they saw the benefits.
Yeah. Man, I still believe that South Korea will do well. It just has a difficult neighbor.
Right.
Is what
That's
holds
true.
them back. Yeah.
Because Seoul is quite an amazing city.
Yes, and they're producing excellent cars.
Yes,
You
they
think
still
about
are.
that technology.
They really are.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. By the way, before we go, where can people go to find out more information on information about the economy or learn more about economic things they may be interested in?
Yeah, you can always go to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. That's more statistical, more professionally based information. I tell my students to go into these sites such as MarketWatch that you can get on YouTube, or you just can get them on your own. CNBC, the stock program, has a lot of economic news there. It's daily, but it's got a lot of historical stuff as well. So you can do it that well. And if you're a little wise and kind of looking at YouTube items, be careful you don't go into some far-fringent places. You can get some good information in YouTube as well. And, of course, with your podcast.
That's right. We try to educate as well. So, again, economy-wise, economic-wise, we're in a different place than we were. And we're not in a bad place, but because we're in this different place, looks like we may have had a soft landing. We just have to wait and see kind of where we go from here because, it's like you said, we're just in a different place.
Yeah. always different, but optimism always prevails.
For sure,
Yep.
for sure. Thank you again, Carlos.
Okay, thank you, Brad.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can check out our past archive of episodes on kfoxtv.com or listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for breaking it down with me, and we'll see you next time here on The Breakdown.